Welcome to the Breech Birth Podcast. I'm Sasha Hopkins, private midwife, breech birth educator, and your host. This is a space to hear the real, raw, and powerful stories of women who have experienced breech birth in all its layers. Each episode features honest conversations with women who've experienced breech firsthand, offering insight and reflection. This podcast was born from the knowing that these stories need to be heard to inform, connect, and reclaim the story of breech birth. Whether you're navigating breech birth yourself, supporting others, or simply curious, welcome and thank you. Welcome to the podcast, Bianca. Thank you for coming on and to share your story.
Thank you for inviting me.
So just to give a bit of context for anyone listening, could you tell me what year your bubba was born?
So my first son was born in 22 and my second one in 25.
Beautiful. And where were you located at the time for both?
For both babies, I was in Brisbane.
Queensland, Australia, for anyone outside of that area. And what kind of care did you receive during your pregnancy, labour and birth?
So for my first baby, I was in the birth center of my local hospital. And for my second baby, I had a private midwife and I was planning for a home birth, but ended up having a hospital birth. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you. Would you like to tell me a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background?
So I am Brazilian. I have moved to Brisbane in October 21. And I had been trying to fall pregnant for probably around a year at that time. And I had just gone to an obstetrician to talk about maybe going through the route of maybe some fertility treatment or whatever he was advising me to do. I was 34 at that time. And the month after this conversation, I actually felt pregnant naturally. So I didn't have to do anything else. But I was very new here in Brisbane when I felt pregnant for the first time. And I had no idea about anything birth. All I knew was that my mom had 3 kids. All of her kids were born in the hospital with a natural birth. She had an epidural for my 2 brothers. I'm the oldest. And yeah, I really didn't know anything what I was getting into. All I knew is that she said it hurt.
Great. Thanks, Mum.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Awesome. So would you like to go into your story for your first, for Thomas?
Yeah. So as I said, when I felt pregnant, it was kind of like a funny story because I had just came back from Brazil and the pandemic was still going on. So we had to do the quarantine at home. And when I was going to actually book an appointment to start the fertility treatment the obstetrician had recommended me. And just before I called him, I was stuck at home for the 2 weeks that we had to quarantine for. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a pregnancy test. And yeah, it was positive. So the first thing, I was at home, I had nothing else to do. So the first thing I did was try to find out what did I have to do. Because yeah, as I said, like I had no idea of even how the medical system works here. All I knew was the medical system in Brazil and how things work there. And to be honest, even my husband being Australian, he didn't know as well. Like he never had to use much. Like he's just like a man in his 30s who never had to do anything. He had no idea. So like, yeah, Google was my best friend at that time. And because, as I said, my mom had natural birth, that's all I ever taught. So I thought to myself, well, that's what I'm going to look for. And I found out on I think it was the Queensland Health website that my best chances were to go via the birth center. And I felt very lucky because I was like, wow, the birth center is actually my catchment hospital. So I went to my GP, I think I did a blood test, and then she referred me to the birth center. I think I was really early on my pregnancy, like maybe 7 weeks, and they accepted me. So I was really happy with that. I started going to the appointments. The midwives at that time, it was a group. I know that now it's not anymore, but at that time it was a group. So I saw 2 of the midwives from the 3 that I had during my whole pregnancy. For some reason, I never had the 3rd midwife in my appointments. I only had 2. They were always very nice. Like the appointments were very like clarifying to a point. I felt very safe with them. And up until the 30th week, when I had to have an ultrasound, just to double check something about Thomas that they wanted to check from the 20-week ultrasound. It wasn't anything major. And then in the ultrasound, they told me that Thomas was breech. But for some reason, they actually wrote in the report that he was not breech. They wrote that he was cephalic.
Yep.
So on my following appointment, I think it was when I was around 32 weeks, I went to a following appointment and the midwives had this report and they saw that he was cephalic, although I knew that he was breech. I saw him in the ultrasound being breech. And then they touched my belly, and because I think when I got pregnant, my belly was quite compact. It was the same in my 2 pregnancies. I now understand that they had a little bit of a bias, whereas like most of the pregnancies have like a baby head down. And the report was telling them that, even though I was telling them that that wasn't what I saw. They were like, oh, maybe he just turned. So that was what I left with. Like, oh, okay, maybe he turned. And I didn't think much of it, to be honest. Like, I had no idea of what would be the consequences if he was breech at that point. I don't think no one told me that, like, I couldn't have a vaginal birth or anything like that. Maybe just because it was too early to decide. But yeah, I didn't really give, like, a lot of thought on that. I was exercising a little, just walking. I was doing some spinning babies exercise. I did hypnobirthing during the pregnancy. So yeah, everything was going fine. I was feeling pretty, I don't know, confident that everything was going to happen as I wanted. When I was around 39 weeks, I was a little bit, I don't know, I wouldn't say insecure, but I would say that I had a little bit of a bug in the back of my mind, like, is everything okay? Is everything how they told me? And I asked one of the midwives to have an ultrasound. And she told me, well, you're term now. So if you're term, the hospital policy is for you to have an induction. And I said, well, I don't want to have an induction. So then she's like, well, are you feeling baby move? And I'm like, yeah, he's moving. So she's like, wow, so yeah, just continue being pregnant. And I'm like, okay, I brushed that feeling off. There was nothing else that I could do at that point. I didn't want to have an induction. She told me that I couldn't do anything as per the hospital policy. And yeah, I just continued pregnant then. Then when I was 41 plus, I think 3 or 4 days, I went to the hospital to do a normal check. Oh, no, actually, they offered me an induction after. I think maybe when I was 41, they called me and they offered me the induction. I said no, but let's talk about it maybe in a few days. So 3 or 4 days later, I was like, well, I'm reaching 42 weeks. Maybe I'll go and see if I'll start an induction. And I went to the hospital, and funny enough, I had the third midwife, the one that had not seen me during my whole pregnancy was there. And when she touched my belly to have the conversation of the induction, she thought that he was breech. And like, I looked at my husband, he looked at me and we're like, oh, I don't know, like whatever that means, right? And she was like, not really sure. And that's kind of like a part that bothers me a little bit, because then she just pulled an ultrasound machine from the corridor and saw that he was indeed breech, which, like, thinking back, I'm like, why that other midwife didn't do that? I have no idea. But yeah, she checked he was breech. And after that, I remember she coming back to the room after returning the ultrasound to the place where it was and telling us that because he was breech, I could not be induced because the type of contractions that the induction process would produce would cause some stress in the baby, or I don't really remember, but she said I couldn't have an induction then. She was pretty supportive of me just continue being pregnant. She didn't pressure me to have a C-section straight away. She told me that I have the option of just waiting and then trying to have a natural vaginal birth, or I could have a C-section if I wanted, or I could try for a VC. So I said, well, I'm gonna try for the VC, and they arranged me for me to have the VC straight away. They called the specialist in the hospital.
ECV? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sometimes I say it in Portuguese because that's it changes the order. Yeah. So ECV. Yeah. So I did the ECV, or better, the doctor did it or tried to do it. He tried to turn Thomas' head and he would just come back. Like he was sort of like stuck between my ribs, and it was not a bad experience at all. I was a little bit scared because I had read that it was like it could be very painful. Like they made me sign this term saying that I could have some placental abruption or something like that, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I was fine. I didn't have even any cramps or anything like that after the ECV, and he didn't turn. So I was really determined to have a vaginal birth. So I told the midwife that I wanted to try it again the next day. So that was a Thursday, and I came back on the Friday, and I had another ECV, and the same thing happened. He just wouldn't turn. On the ultrasound, they also let me know that Thomas was probably around 4 to 4.5 kilo. So the doctor was like, as my husband likes to say, he was like sharpening his knives and like ready for the C-section. He was like,
Yeah.
okay, so he's too big, he's not turning, C-section, let's go. And I'm like, nah, I'm not doing it. Um, and yeah, to that point, the midwife was also very nice. She was like, no, you can wait. You don't have to do anything now. He's telling you that, but like, that's not the truth. They don't know anything. Like, the ultrasound is just an estimate. It could be wrong. She was really, I think, like confident that I could go and labor and have a natural breech vaginal birth.
Is this still the third midwife that picked it up?
That's still the
Yep.
like throughout
Yep.
like the all my last appointments, she was there. Like
She
I
was
didn't see
on.
the other two.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is so interesting, right? Like thinking that I only had her in the end and not throughout the whole pregnancy. But yeah. So then she sent me home with a Breech vaginal birth book, and she also recommended me to go on the weekend and try to do some exercise, to do acupuncture to see if I could start labor or turn the baby naturally. Yeah, and moxibustion. That's also
Yep.
another thing that I tried then. Like I spent the
Yep.
whole weekend doing everything that I could to try to turn the baby.
At 41 plus weeks.
Yeah,
Yep.
41 plus 5.
Yep.
But then she told me that I should go back to the hospital both on Saturday and Sunday just to check everything was okay, because they say that like in the hospital policy they should check that your placenta is not getting old or something like that. And I went back. I was fine. Like I wasn't feeling unwell or anything like that. And I went back. Both my CTGs were okay. But then I was going to be 42 weeks on Monday, and I feel like that thing of like the baby being big, the baby didn't want to turn, I could not have an induction, like all of that started playing out in my mind and thinking, well, if he's not going to be born, or even if I go into labor spontaneously, but he's too big and he's stuck, and I don't know, I just felt a little bit scared of continuing to wait just because they told me how much increase that would be in risks going past 42 weeks and being breech. So at that point, then I accepted the C-section. And yeah, I had a C-section at 42 exact weeks. The C-section, yeah, just before I asked to have a vaginal examination, just to make sure that I wasn't really going to labor. And yeah, my cervix was completely closed. I had no contractions, nothing. Just went to the C-section. I cannot say it was an awful experience, but it wasn't good. It wasn't what I wanted. And to this day, I think that also wasn't what Thomas wanted, because he was very distressed. He didn't settle for the whole time that we were in the hospital. He would just cry, 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 cry. And the midwives would tell me that he was hungry and I would feed him. I was having enough milk, and I know that I never had any issue with breastfeeding, but they kept saying that he wasn't feeding enough and that's why he was crying. But well, the moment we put him in the car seat to go home after one night in the hospital, he settled and he's been fine since then. He just hates the hospital like me.
Awesome. And did you keep your placenta for Thomas's birth at all? Did you know that if that was an option at all?
No, I didn't. The things that I ended up, as I said, I was really planning for a vaginal birth. So that's one, I don't know if I regret, but I really had no idea what to expect from a C-section. I had never been in a hospital before in my life. I had never been given any anesthesia or anything like that. Yeah, even last here in Australia, like, yeah, I really was not prepared for what was going to happen. The little things that I did was asking for the delayed cord clamp, which like the delayed for them is waiting for 1 minute. I think that's probably the procedure. They wouldn't wait for more. I did have a little bit of skin to skin, but I just asked to see my placenta. I remember seeing it really quickly. It was in a bucket, and they pretty much said like, here it is. And that was it.
Yeah, okay. No sort of explanation.
No.
Okay. And how long did you stay in the hospital for after the birth?
1 night. He was born at 11
After a cesarean?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I asked to be discharged. Like, I hated it so much. And the midwives were kind of laughing because of how distressed Thomas was. They were not helpful with me. Yeah, so I really didn't feel well in the hospital. And then I asked to be discharged just after the first night. I was like, nah, I'm not going to stay here. It was really bad.
And did you get many home visits once you were home?
Yeah, I think I had the normal home visits after the birth that the birth center gives. I think it were 5 or 6.
Okay.
Not sure, but yeah, they came and they did the new.
Oh,
What's
the
the name?
neonatal screen tests.
Yeah,
Yeah, the heel prick
yeah, yeah.
tests. Yeah.
The heel prick test, and they helped me a little bit with the feeding. I had a little bit of over lactation. How do you call that?
Oversupply of milk.
Oversupply. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So yeah, they somehow helped me or not help me with that, but
Yep. Amazing.
yeah, it was okay. I healed okay. After maybe 2 months of Thomas being born, I asked to have a debrief with that midwife, the third one, and she came and we had a debrief. And the thing that I was really worried about is that I could have a vaginal birth afterwards. And she told me, "Oh, yes, you can, but in our hospital, you cannot come to the birth center anymore because you're considered high risk. And I would recommend you to try to look for an MGP group in another hospital, which would be out of catchment for me." So that was kind of the takeaway that I got from my C-section experience. I thought it was very unfair that like they sort of made me have a C-section, but then also were not able to help me afterwards. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's how it was.
Yeah. So you mentioned you had some acupuncture, you had some moxibustion, you did spinning babies. Was there anything else? Did you do any chiro or osteo?
No, I think at that time, no, I did. Actually, I did. I did chiropractor because just after the first ultrasound, I thought that like his breech. So I think someone told me that going to chiropractor would help him turn. And I went to maybe a couple of sessions, and I thought that also to me maybe he turned because of that. So yeah, it was a bit obscure if he was breech or not. But what the midwife told me after Thomas was born is that it was pretty clear that he had always been breech, like from the shape of his head. Like it's not like he had just turned. Yeah.
Yeah. And so was he a frank breech? Do you know, like the legs up or was
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
His legs were up.
Yeah, they're quite obvious when they come out because the legs are up by the face.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the way they pulled him too was like very through his hips.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Your partner, you said how he felt like the doctor was sharpening his knives. How did he feel around that experience and was he supportive?
He has always been very supportive. I don't feel like he had any preference. I feel like he would be supportive if I had wanted a C-section. But it was really nice to have done the hypnobirthing course with him because I think it pretty much put him in the mood. I feel like in the hypnobirthing course that we did, we were sort of aware that hospitals would try to do lots of interventions and would try to tell us what to do. And having the midwife with us when we did the 2 ECVs was also good because, like, the moment the obstetrician would leave the room, she would, like, calm down. Like, I know that he said lots of scary things. I know that he said that your baby might die if you go past 42 weeks, but that's not how it is. It's something like from 0.01 to 0.02. Yes, it's double, but it's still very small. So, yeah, it was nice to have her kind of like assuring us. But we also know that the hospital policy is sort of like the hospital policy, and they do that because I don't know, like they have to, I guess. But yeah, I found that my husband has always been really supportive in that sense of if I said I'm fine, baby's moving, he would always like be okay. We just keep going. He never pressured me into anything.
Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. And did you have any family around for that postpartum support during your pregnancy?
Yeah. Well, that's another funny part of the story because, so as I said, I'm from Brazil and my mom came for his birth. So she arrived when I was, I think, 39 weeks. I think I stopped working when I was 38 weeks and she arrived the week after. And she arrived with COVID. So she was for a whole week locked in the room, and I was a bit afraid of going into labor and her having COVID and what would happen with the baby. And yeah, it was quite stressful to have her sick during that period. But then, yeah, she got better after 1 week, and I was still pregnant. So, but I also know that that played a little bit in my head when I decided for the C-section because she had already been here for 3 weeks. So, and she was going home after, I think, 1 week. She stayed a little bit more than 4 weeks at that time. So, yeah, that was playing a bit in my mind. I'm like, wow, she came to see him being born and she might go back and not even see him if I don't do this, the surgery, you know? So it seems a bit
It's a lot
silly.
of pressure.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you feel empowered with your choice?
No, not really. And that's part of my frustration about it because as much as I take accountability because I was the one who decided in the end, I wish that I knew more about it back then. I wish that I had seek for better support and even had more time to prepare in case I even had to have a C-section. But I feel like because I found that out so late, it was so rushed. I didn't really know. It was just kind of like a few scary days because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was just hoping and praying that I was going to go into labor naturally because I was still confident that I could do it, even if it was Breech. But then, yeah, there were the two sides. The part of me that was confident and the part of me that was not prepared.
It's hard. You're in a vulnerable state at that point in your pregnancy as well.
Yeah, and as I said, like I know why I took the decision that I did, but I also know that I was feeling fine, that Thomas was fine. I didn't really have a reason to be so concerned, except from what the hospital was telling me, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but
Yeah.
there's no way to go back. And I feel like I learned a lot with that experience too.
Yeah. Beautiful. I think that's the main thing for people to come back to when we have an experience that we're not 100% happy with. It's being able to look at it from a different perspective. Okay, what did I learn from this? And what am I taking forward to help me positively in the future?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like that was a very good outcome of the debrief that I had, to be honest, because I know that lots of people regret like the way they gave birth or the way things happen. And yeah, as I said, I know nothing about it before. And I don't even know how I found out that I could have a debrief, but I was so angry because I was angry thinking that I could have had an ultrasound and done something earlier. I was angry that I could have like had other choices. I was angry that I didn't see this midwife to the end and she then just pulled the ultrasound from the corridor. I was angry with the treatment that I got from the postnatal ward and I wrote a complaint to the hospital
Mm.
and they kind of like said they received the complaint. Someone called to say they were sorry, but that doesn't change anything.
Mm.
But at least when the midwife came and we talked about it, I knew that I wanted to have a conversation with a purpose, and the purpose was doing it differently if I were to have another baby in the future. Because, as I said, I cannot go back in time and change all these things. Yeah, all I could do is just kind of free myself from any guilt or any resentment about it, and yeah, just move on and take different decisions in the future, which I did.
And it's great that you did report what you weren't happy with, because as midwives, when we put reports in, not much gets done. But as a consumer, it may not feel like much is done, but in numbers, it can make a change. So it does help the
Yeah,
more people who do that.
yeah, I
And
agree.
it's a hard process to do, and you shouldn't have to,
Yeah,
but it can help.
totally. Yeah, I feel like
Mm.
it's very unfair because even I have a friend that like was doing her antenatal care at the same hospital, and I know that she was accepted in this program very late in her pregnancy, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. How
Mm.
did you do that? And she said that she wrote a complaint, and I'm like, wow,
Ah,
that's funny, right? Because
yeah.
she wrote a complaint about her midwife in the program that she was in, but instead of like fixing her program, they changed her program. Like
Yeah.
they changed her
Yeah.
to the different one. So I'm like, ah, yeah, okay. Like it kind of like told her to be quiet, but then did it solve the problem for the other women that were living through the same thing
No,
and
that's right.
maybe didn't have the courage or didn't have the words to complain?
It's a
Yeah,
quick fix solution, that one.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. But I mean, I am the type of person who will speak up, and even if it's not heard, I at least I can sleep thinking that I did my part.
So, would you like to share a little bit about Vince and your experience? So, he wasn't born Breech, but he was
Yeah.
Breech for a period of time. I'm sure people would love to hear a bit of what that looked like and how old Thomas was when you fell pregnant.
Yeah. So when Thomas was 2 years old. I found out that I was pregnant for the second time, but that time was actually a lot easier. I didn't have to try much because pretty much as soon as I stopped breastfeeding, when he was
Mm.
1.5, it happened, which was very good for me because the stress before was not great. And the moment I felt pregnant, I kind of like relieved everything. Like I didn't think that this was going to hit me like it did. but it really put me in sort of like a panic of the same thing happening and going through another C-section. And I was like, no, I cannot let that happen. So I started looking at the options that I had in terms of care, especially considering I actually canceled my private health when Thomas was born, just because I thought that the public system did everything. And I had private health then, and it wasn't used. They had told me that we could, but yeah, it wasn't. So I was like, oh, I'm just paying this for nothing. So we had canceled our private care, and I had just had a friend who had a baby in another hospital, not the one in my catchment, and she was really happy with our care. So I was like, well, maybe I'm gonna try this program. It's a private program. I went for an appointment with an obstetrician there, and I really didn't feel like it was for me. It was, I mean, all the obstetricians that I've seen so far were really procedural, like 15 minutes in and out, didn't talk much. This doctor that I saw, she told me that I could have a VBAC, which is then what I found out that I needed, like a vaginal birth after cesarean. And she said, oh, yeah, you're a good candidate. Goodbye. And that was it. Not a lot of conversation or, yeah, anything else in depth. And especially considering that I had a like good, except from the last part, I had a good experience with my antenatal care in the birth center, and I knew it could be different. I decided that that wasn't for me. So I did a little bit more research, and then I settled that I was going to try for home birth, which was something that I had never thought in my whole life. Like, that's not something common in Brazil, and even I don't think it's that common here in Australia. Um, and I feel like maybe when I felt pregnant for the first time, it was like so clear that I was going to go to a hospital. That's what everyone does. And that's where you're safe. And even when I mentioned to my husband at the first time that I was going to go for home birth, he was like, don't know if that's a good idea. He was a little bit skeptical about it. Like, no, let's look for a midwife. It's not like I'm gonna do it by myself, but let's look for a midwife and do it safely at home. And the first thing that I found out is that once you have a breech baby, I mentioned that when I was talking to midwives, it already puts people a little bit not at ease. If I felt that people were thinking that I was going to have another breech baby and they didn't really want to support me with that. Even if like I was so early in the pregnancy again, I think I was like 7 or 8 weeks. And on top of that, I had already had a C-section. Yeah, it wasn't the easiest thing to find a midwife that was willing to take me. I heard a few no's because of the risks, quote unquote, of having a vaginal birth after a cesarean, and then on top of it, having had a breech birth before. And I was really, really happy when I found a midwife that could support me. She was really confident about breech. She was actually very confident that even if I had a breech baby this time again, I could have a vaginal birth with that breech baby. And we had our first meeting with my husband, and he was also very confident in her knowledge, which I feel like especially for men, that's like even more important to know that someone has done the study, knows the textbook stuff. And obviously it's important for me too, but I knew that for him it was even more important to know like she had the right qualifications and she would know what to do if we needed. So after the first appointment, we were really confident that that's what we were going to go for. And yeah, I didn't look back on that decision at all. My antenatal appointments at home, not having to deal with the pressure of the hospital, not having to deal with like all the scare things that they mentioned, even if it didn't affect me the first time, I feel like the second time around, having had the cesarean, I think that the conversation would have been a little bit different.
Yep.
So yeah, it was very nice to have that this time. Then when I was around 32 weeks, I had a bleeding. So I was on holiday. I was out of Brisbane and I had a bleeding. It was just kind of out of the blue. I wasn't feeling anything bad. I could feel veins moving, and I sent a photo to my midwife, and she told me that I should just put a pad on and see how much blood was coming. Like, it wasn't like a hemorrhage or anything like that. She's like, well, observe to see if there's more blood coming. And a little bit more blood came, and because it was the holiday and we were away, she advised me to go back to Brisbane and to go to the hospital to have it checked. So I went back to the hospital to have myself and the baby checked. And yeah, that's another moment that I didn't expect that was going to hit me this much. But I went back to my catchment hospital. I hadn't been there for my whole antenatal appointments. And when we arrived there, my husband was with me, and we were like, this is not what we want. Like everything in the hospital was not what we wanted. The midwives were okay, but then after I was in the CTG for a little while, they said that we were both fine. I had an obstetrician come and see me, and she was quite rude and dismissive. I told her that I was having some other symptoms and feeling very breathless, and she was just very dismissive. So it really, I don't know, calcified the feeling that I didn't want to go back there.
Yep.
But I ended up asking for an ultrasound just to double check and release any concerns about the bleeding. So I went back for an ultrasound.
You didn't have any pain or anything with that?
No, I didn't really have any pain. The bleeding just happened and it didn't really continue. So that was something that obviously I was worried because it's not common to have bleeding, especially at this late in pregnancy.
Especially when you've had a caesarean before, it's obviously
Exactly
something you want to be mindful.
So yeah, and everyone is talking about uterine rupture and things like that. But in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I'm feeling okay. I can feel moves. So yeah, things might be fine. But I wanted to know if there was something that they could see in the ultrasound. So I went back to the hospital a couple of days later just to check that there wasn't anything to worry about. And that's when we found out that Vince was also breech. So, but I didn't really get scared. I had this midwife that was really confident with that. I told her, she was like, that's okay. Like, if you want, you can try to do some exercises and try to turn him, but you don't need to be worried because if he really decides that he wants to be breech until the end of the pregnancy, that's also okay. You can labor him like that and it's safe. Like, that was very reassuring to me. I was still thinking of doing exercises, and I did yoga during my whole pregnancy this time. So I told my yoga instructor about it. We were doing exercises to try and turn him, but it wasn't something scary. It was more like, well, if you can turn him, that's fine. If you can't, that's also fine. What happened that changed everything a little bit was that maybe 2 weeks later, she told me that she could not have me in care anymore. And that was when I kind of like spiraled a bit and I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen then? Because I was so confident and so happy with my decision. And I was just crying and talking to my husband, like, now I cannot have the birth that I want anymore.
Did she say why she couldn't care for you?
Yeah, it wasn't really something that it was in her control. She had restrictions and she could not attend a home birth. It was nothing to do with like my VBAC or me being breech or anything like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I got that call, it really like pretty much put me back to step zero, but worse than zero because at that point then I was in the final trimester of the pregnancy. So if it was hard to find a midwife when I was 8 weeks and they were thinking that my baby could be breech, at 35 weeks with ultrasound of a breech baby in a VBAC, planning for a home birth, I thought that it was like pretty much close to impossible. I called so many different midwives. I posted online and I just tried my best to find someone who would take me. And at the same time, I went to acupuncture and I went to osteopath. Like I found a very good osteopath close to my house. And I think that she actually did some really good stuff because 2 weeks later, I did another ultrasound and he had turned. And
so how many weeks was that?
36.
Yeah.
36. That's when I found out he had turned.
And you feel like that was the osteo that helped?
I feel like, but it could have been everything together too.
Bit of combination.
Yeah, I did the moxibustion, I did the acupuncture, I did the spinning babies, and I did the osteopath. So yeah, one of these things happened to
Something
work.
worked.
Like I cannot really confidently say which one was the one who did the deed, but yeah, it was done.
Did you feel it when he flipped?
I didn't. Honestly, I didn't.
No.
No, he was always moving a lot. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Thomas did move, but I felt like Vince was a lot more aggressive in his moves.
Yeah.
So he was always moving. I could even see from outside of my belly, like his moves. So maybe that's why I didn't really notice because he was just very active.
He's active, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like that was what allowed me to then find another midwife who was willing to take me. I had, in fact, told her about the breech, and she said that she had attended breech vaginal births before, but she didn't feel confident to take me if he was breech. So finding out that he had turned actually allowed me to continue planning for a home birth, which was very good and really put me at ease. But at the same time, because I had like this stressful weeks looking for another option, I ended up also going to the out of catchment hospital to try to get myself booked in because I knew that if I needed in the end to go to the hospital, I could not go to my catchment hospital just because of how I had been treated there before and my last experience. So, yeah, I really wanted to avoid it at all costs. So I did that. I went to an appointment there. They saw the ultrasounds, they saw that he had been breech. Ultimately, the obstetrician there was kind of like, oh, okay, you're planning for a home birth. That's fine. You're planning for a VBAC. That's okay. I feel like you're a good candidate for it. But you will need to have cannula, you will need to have monitoring, you need to have this and this and this and that. And she made a list. And I'm like, okay. I kind of just said like, fine, like I'll probably reject everything when it comes to
in the
time, but I
moment.
didn't really want to waste my energy discussing with her then. I was then probably 37 or 38 weeks. So I went to that booking appointment and I didn't go back to any other one. But at least they then had my history there and I was a little bit more confident that if I had to go birth in the hospital, I had a better plan B.
Yeah. Yeah. So you birthed at home or hospital?
Yeah, I finished my antenatal appointments planning for a home birth. I had my birth pool delivered. We had a birth team meeting. I also had a doula throughout this whole journey. And like she was really amazing. She was really, really supportive in everything that happened. So I feel like that's another decision that I took early on that really helped me put myself in the right mental state, even when things got harder. She was really there and she was kind of like shining light in times of darkness. And we had the birthday meeting. Everyone was really well aligned and confident now that he was head down, and I was just waiting for him to be born. When I think I had my last antenatal appointment when I was 40 weeks plus one or something like that. And the day after, my doula came and I told her that I was really afraid of not going into labor. And that was probably my second fear because I didn't go into labor the first time and I didn't want to risk going really overdue and having all the pressure and then dealing with the risks that come from it, or at least the risks they tell you that there are. So I was really scared of not going into labor. And that night, when I went to bed, I felt like I had something wet between my legs. And that actually got me so excited. Like I went to the toilet and I turned on the light and I'm like, oh my God, my water's broke. That's amazing. I called my husband. He was already sleeping. And I'm like, can you imagine? I was feeling some cramps. I didn't know they were contractions yet. So I woke him up and I'm like, look, I think my water's broke. But then when I turned the light on, it was red, like really red. And he looked at me and he's like, I don't think this is your waters. And I'm like, no, it must be. Maybe there's like the mucus plug. I really didn't want to believe that it wasn't.
Yeah.
I was like, no, maybe it's the mucus plug. And I know that there's some blood there and that's fine. And he continued Googling and he's like, yeah, that doesn't look like it. It was really bright red. And we sent a photo to my midwife and she's like, well, yeah, that's not your mucus plug. You better go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital, got everything checked. The bleeding actually didn't continue. So it was another time of just some blood and it stopped. So after doing some monitoring, they told me that they would like me to, because I was contracting, they told me that they wanted me to labor in the hospital because of it was a VBAC. But then I said, no, I'm going home. Okay, I have a son to be caring for, so I'm not gonna stay here. I wasn't contracting much. I knew I was contracting, but I wasn't really scared about the bleeding. Baby was moving fine. I was feeling fine. So I went back home and we slept a little bit. And when I woke up the next day, there was more bleeding. So I went back to the hospital again, had the same things happen. But then at that time, they asked me for a vaginal examination and I allowed that. And the midwife said that I was in labor and I should be admitted. So I was like, okay. I was actually contracting a lot more than the day after. So I was admitted and I stayed laboring in the birth room for maybe 2 hours. And then my contractions just stopped. Like they really stalled and started to go slow. The obstetrician came and told me that they were going to transfer me to the ward. And the good thing about it is that the obstetrician from the hospital was very on board with my home birth plans. And he was also on board with me wanting to have a vaginal birth. So he was like, I understand that you want to have a vaginal birth. I agree that that's the safest option for you. I don't think you need to have an induction. You're feeling fine. The baby's fine. But yeah, we really advise you to labor in the ward now, just to avoid any risk because of the bleeding. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay, but I don't want to labor here because I really don't like hospitals. So I went back home. So this happened actually 2 more times. So
Wow.
the following, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly the same thing. I'm not gonna like talk too much about it, but exactly the same thing happened two
Yeah.
more days. So that started on Friday, and I went to the hospital on Saturday, on Sunday, and on Monday. And on Monday, I actually didn't have bleeding, but yeah, the same thing happened. The doctor trying to convince me to stay, me saying that I wasn't going to stay, and yeah, up until Tuesday when
And so by this point, had you decided or realised it would be a hospital birth?
yeah, at that point, I spoke to my midwife. I spoke to
Yep.
her every day, and I was talking to her when I was in the hospital. She heard what the doctor was saying. And even there was one doctor on Sunday that was trying to push me for an induction, and it didn't really make sense. How do you call the specialist doctor?
Oh, consultant?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
consultant. Yeah, the consultant was the one that was really on the same page with me. So the
Yep.
consultant would say like, nah, no, I don't think he thinks the induction is the best option. And he was fine with me just coming back when I had a bleeding or if I thought that my contractions were ramping up.
Yep.
I was all the time talking to my midwife, and she said to me that if I really wanted to have a home birth and if I was really feeling confident that everything was okay, she would support me in that. But her advice, because of the bleeding and because of being a VBAC and like not being sure of what was the origin, because no one could ever detect what was causing the bleeding, she said that the safest would probably for me to birth in the hospital. And she was happy to come to the hospital with me. But yeah, ultimately it was my decision. So I was kind of like here and there because on Monday I didn't have a bleeding. So I was like, maybe I can birth at home. But I ended up like going to the hospital because my mom just arrived that day. And I'm like, well, I'm just gonna go and check everything is okay. I was contracting really a lot. And I was admitted again. And again, the contractions failed. So I came back home on Tuesday. And to be honest, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this game. Like, I don't really care. Like, if he doesn't want to be born, because I've been to that point, I was like, I have to accelerate labor and being on the ball and like doing all the things that they tell you to do and climb the stairs. And it wasn't really happening. The contractions would just come and be really close together and then stay after a few hours. So like, I gave up. I just woke up, had breakfast, and went back to bed. And a few hours later, the contractions started really strong, like really, really strong. And then I really needed to go to the toilet, and I couldn't because I felt like his head was really pressing in my bladder. So I decided to go to the toilet, to the shower, so I could move a little bit and help the pee come. And when I could finally do a little wee, there was a lot of blood. So that's when we were like, okay, that's not happening at home, like more blood. And my husband was thinking of maybe even calling the ambulance. But then we had this issue with the catchment hospital. So we ended up just driving to the hospital. Yeah, so we didn't want the ambulance to take us to the catchment hospital. We went to the other one, even because we had been going there for the 4 days before. So we went there, and yeah, it was really quick from then on. Like we just arrived in the hospital. I arrived at around 4 p.m. I was admitted maybe at 5. I was in the monitoring room for around an hour up until when my waters broke. My waters broke when I was still being monitored, and I was just admitted in the birth room, and he was born 1 hour later. So it was really, really quick.
So you got your V back.
I did. Yes, it was.
Did your midwife
amazing.
make it? Because it sounds like it was quick.
No, we ended up like not calling her because she was so far.
Yeah.
Because we knew that like it was really close, and she was. I mean, we called her just to tell her that there was bleeding, but because it was really hard to find another midwife, she was on the other side of the city. It would have taken. And it was rush hour. We went to the hospital at 3:30. So, like, there was no way she would have made it like in time. So it was okay. But my doula did make. She was amazing. She really like advocated for us, and yeah, it was a really good experience in the end. Even if it was in the hospital, I felt like everything happened how it was supposed to.
I guess it may be beneficial for that healing process that you were able to have a positive experience in that setting. it's great for women to hear that, to know that it is possible.
No, it is. It is. But I also think that you really need to be 100% certain of what you want for that to
Yes.
happen. And I can totally see that now because I don't think that I would have been so confident in coming back home during labor all those times if I
Mm.
didn't have the right instruction with both my midwives, like who did my antenatal appointments, who I could talk to and answer questions and tell me about risks, and could have said no to induction, could have said no to C-section because they are the specialists, right? Like they look at you like, oh, you don't know. And unless you really are confident when you respond to them, they are going to push a little bit. You really need to be that confident to say no. And yeah, I don't think that if I had done my whole antenatal appointments in the hospital, would have been this prepared to do that.
Yeah. It sounds like they gave you the opportunity and realization that you could decline, you could say no, which is
Yeah,
important. Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. I probably only have one more question for you. Is there any advice, wisdom, resources that you would recommend to anyone who has a breech baby on board?
I don't know. I feel like when you read about breech babies online, it can be a little bit scary because there are very little people doing a breech vaginal birth. The resources are really limited. And I know that even the fact that my midwife the first time was supportive of me birthing vaginally and waiting for me to be 42 weeks maybe wouldn't have been accepted in lots of other hospital settings, not only here in Australia, but around the world. I know that friends of mine don't have, like, even with a head down baby, don't are not allowed to wait until 40 past 41 weeks. So just knowing that there are resources, but you really need to be resourceful to look for them and filter the information that comes, not let yourself be fear-monged by what's a little bit out of the norm. I feel like the first time that I found out that Thomas was Breech, I had heard that like the statistics are that only 3% of the babies are Breech until the end and everyone turns. And yeah, looking back, I always thought that maybe that's why the midwives didn't give it much attention. But the more and more I talk about that, the more and more I see that there are more breech babies around and more people being submitted to C-sections because of that. So it's not that rare. Yeah, I feel like just informing
I'm
yourself.
hearing about it more and more. So I'm like, is there more breech babies going on, or we're just hearing it because we're talking about it? I don't know.
Yeah, because your eyes are kind of like looking for it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know
yeah,
as well. But
yeah,
yeah, I do think that you really need to be looking for the right resources and be ready to advocate for yourself.
yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm very glad to share about it because I know that ever since I had the two experiences, I feel very strongly that people should have more access to this sort of information. And yeah, that was also helpful during my pregnancy to hear other stories and know that we can do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, you can do amazing things. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Breech Birth podcast. These stories matter. They stretch what we think we know and bring voice to experiences that need to be heard. I'm so grateful to the women who have shared their experiences with us, raw, real, and full of wisdom. If this episode resonated with you, please follow, share, or leave a review. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Breech Birth Podcast. And if you have a breech story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, may we continue to reclaim the narrative, one story